Welcome to the Benefits of Knowledge podcast with Lorne Curry of Curry Financial Group Limited. In this podcast, we are focused on helping businesses set up and manage their group benefit plan to protect and assist their most valuable assets. Join us on this journey where Lorne explores ways to help you develop effective and cost-efficient strategies for your business. Now, on to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Benefits of Knowledge with Lorne Curry. Lorne, how are you today?
Just doing fantastic on this beautiful summer weather here in Peterborough, Ontario.
Oh, that's fantastic. I'm excited. You have a special guest on the show today, and you've given me the honor of introducing him, so I'm going to get right to it. Today we have Elliot Stone. Elliot is the CEO and co-founder of ALAViDa, the Canadian market leader in virtual substance use treatment. ALAViDa has helped over 79% of clients regain control of substance use and 86% reduce in consumption, which those are fantastic numbers. Early in his career, Elliot saw people he loved prevented from getting the help they needed and noticed that when treatment was offered, it was often ineffective or too expensive. Fueled by an empathetic curiosity, Elliot has made it his mission to make evidence-based, non-judgmental care available without barriers to people struggling with substance use. Man, Lorne, what a great guest you brought on.
I'm really excited to have Elliot here. With the COVID stuff we've gone through, we hear so much on whether it's the news, the radio, whatever. Alcohol usage, I think, is up 30-some% compared to what it was pre-COVID. There's lots of people need help, and so I'm really excited to talk to Elliot about this.
Fantastic. Elliot, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah, no, excited to be here.
Great. Okay. Again, thank you from me, Elliot. Appreciate you joining us all the way from Vancouver. So I know you're up early this morning to help us out. Let's just start with ALAViDa provides virtual care for all substances, no matter the challenge any individual is facing. So that's a really wide range. So why do you do it as substance use?
Well, part of it's just educating folks and taking a bit of a different approach. Our mission as a company was really to do this differently, like to rethink the whole process. And I think part of that's by reframing what people think of as addiction or substance use problem, right? When you mentioned it just a moment ago, you hear about it in the news all the time. And part of the challenge with what we hear in the news all the time is that it's mostly geared around opioid deaths. And the reality is that that's tragic and newsworthy. And a lot of effort is being put in to change things there, but it's not relatable to most people. Unless you know someone who's died of opioid overdose, it's just not, it sort of creates an us and them perspective on addiction, when the reality is that the much more common substance is alcohol, as you mentioned. In response to COVID, drinking in general is up. I think it's actually 19% broadly, and then 41% specifically among women. People are more stressed. They're drinking more, and in general, we're, as a culture, I think we're uneducated about the harms of alcohol, and personally and to our long-term health, but also in the workplace, around productivity, and absenteeism and or long-term disability. I think, everyone who's in this business right now is concerned about the wave of, disability cases that are coming once things settle down after the pandemic, sort of the shadow pandemic. And I think that that's a very real concern around substance use. And so, part of why we take a broad approach is to engage people at a much earlier stage, right? The challenge with employee benefits and, the way we handle substance use and addiction in the workplace traditionally is that we wait for somebody to be at a critical point, right? We wait for somebody to notice somebody drinking on the job, or to have an accident, or for somebody just to say, I can't take this anymore. I need to get help, which is usually at a point that's quite late, right? Alcohol is the most common substance. There are other substances, but generally people don't develop a substance use problem overnight. These are things that develop over years, if not decades, in most cases. The average age in our programs, like if we look across programs right now at ALAViDa, I think the average age is close to 50. And so that means that most of these people have been consuming, some substance for 3 decades. And so you think there's a lot of time that we could be, re-educating or changing somebody's relationship with substance before it becomes a critical sort of disability case. And that's really what we do at ALAViDa.
That's great. So you just mentioned the opioid thing there, and I know here in Peterborough, even the council here have meetings on how they can help try and fight this addiction. So it is in the news here, but like you said, behind the scenes, the alcohol, you just don't hear about that, and yet it's, as you said, it's the most common thing, right? So
yeah, and even with opioids, though, there are things, if we think about it, there's sort of, one of the common misconceptions is that, substance use or people with addiction issues are sort of, again, those people, right? Homeless, sort of multiple co-occurring mental health issues, and, people in need of real intensive acute care. And there's a lot of resources sort of dedicated at helping that population. But what most people don't realize is, and again, I'm not making light of that by any means. There should be probably more resources, and I think that there's always a strong need there. But what most people don't realize is that, over 70% of people with, active substance use problems are working full time, right? And we see this mirrored in our population, from the very beginning when we started, offering intensive sort of alternative care, or alternative treatment services to traditional rehab. Most of the people who were engaging were doing it completely confidentially, on their own time, and they were all working full time. And what was interesting, Lorne, was that many of them, it's sort of like everyone has an idea of what serious is, but serious or intense or severe is usually not what's going on with me. I just have a little problem, right? I'm not that, it's not that bad. And the reality is when you diagnose people who are, there are a lot of people out there who are high functioning, but actually quite severe in their substance use disorder and in need of help. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they need to leave work immediately. And part of what we've done at ALAViDa is really to work at changing this mindset of, okay, substance use issue identified, go home and await further instruction. Basically we'll
Right.
be in touch on, sending you to a specialist and or starting your disability case. And that's if you're, fortunate enough to work for an employer that's large enough to really support that process, or if the benefits are there. But the reality is that if a workplace problem wasn't existing the day before someone came forward, why should one be existing once they reach out and ask for help? And part of the question here is like, why is the employer involved in this at all, right? And this is, I actually did a presentation on this recently, just around, the reason why HR is involved in many cases. In some cases something happens at work, and if there's a workplace issue or a health and safety issue, somebody's intoxicated on the job or there's an accident, those are clearly serious events and should be handled the way that they are handled in safety-sensitive organizations. But if somebody's coming forward and saying, hey, I'm concerned about my drinking, that's somebody reaching out for help. And the reason that they're coming forward to HR or someone else is because there's nothing in their benefits that speaks specifically to the problem that they're having. And they don't know where to turn. And that often, it's an interesting challenge because it often then becomes a workplace problem when it wasn't. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and one of the reasons I was so interested when I was approached by Yolanda from ALAViDa was one of my clients reached out to me where they had an issue and they were trying to get help for someone. And, trying to get somebody help when they need it now, go home and wait for 4 or 5 months till we can get you in somewhere. It's just not working, right? So
yeah.
that's...
Yeah, I was going to say, Lorne, think about, it's important to sort of, it's almost two conversations, really. Like the conversation that we're having as part of, our Hello Trail premium service that we sell as a build-in and group plans is a pre-disability option, again, to sort of identify people before those critical events happen and get them, multidisciplinary evidence-based care that really speaks to exactly what's going on with them, right?
Right.
And does it 100% confidentially without involving the employer or anybody else. Just like if you had carpal tunnel or you twisted your ankle, those are things that you deal with through your benefits, and no one in your place of work really needs to know specifically what's going on with your health. But the difference there between that and really at ALAViDa, we serve a full spectrum, again, across substance and across severity, and that includes those issues like you mentioned, where again, something's happened at work, or somebody's shown up intoxicated, or they're in critical point where other people are involved, whether that's a caseworker, an EAP, or HR, or a manager, and in those cases, we handle them a bit differently. They're obviously more intensive. They tend to be doctor-led, and we really, we take somebody through all the same sort of process that those safety-sensitive organizations will be used to. In other words, there's a specialist assessment done, a recommendation, and then treatment follows. But the difference is that we're able to do it much faster. We're able to do it either 100% virtually or in cooperation, sometimes with a collaboration with a local care team if needed, and we're able to do it for a longer period of time that really sets them up for success. So we're not just saying, okay, remove them from the workplace, and then give them intensive treatment and then put them back into the workplace and then we're done. Instead, we take them through the specialist assessment, into the treatment, and then return them to work while they're still getting the support of treatment ongoing for a significant period, usually months. So it really sets them up for a successful return to work, which is, again, even in the cases where people have the most intensive care, so unionized workers and so forth that do get sent to these inpatient rehab facilities. Oftentimes the aftercare is where it's really not, the follow-through isn't there in many cases. Right. And this is an area where we really, again, have changed the paradigm of how we offer this treatment, in the sense that it's a lot longer in duration, and we can support someone as they return to work, again, confidentially through their smartphone in a way that's comfortable for them and that makes their manager and their coworker feel more comfortable, bringing them back into the workplace, because it's a challenge.
Right.
But just sorry, I wanted to just separate those two, because they are treated very differently, and we have two sort of different products for those. But we can speak to sort of the entire world of substance use.
Okay, now that sounds, and I can just imagine the importance of that long-term support. It's like when you have one of these issues, it just doesn't get fixed. It's that long-term support that's going to make the person successful. That sounds great. Yeah. Yeah,
and it is. Sorry, Lorne. It's just taking that, like you say, it's a chronic care approach, really, in the sense that it's funny because substance use and addiction has really gone through so many things culturally over the past decades. There was a long, hard fight to actually have it validated as a medical condition, years and years ago. And then we've, now gone down this path so it's a chronic condition as well. But the thing is, we haven't actually, I don't think we've fully treated it that way, because we know how to deal with chronic disease. There are a lot of great examples of where, especially employee benefits have been very successful in being a very big part of changing, how chronic disease impacts a population, like, Canada-wide. If you look at things like diabetes, or hypertension, and others where, employee benefits and employers and plan sponsors have played a huge role in really changing long-term health of those populations by offering benefits that really get to them earlier and really change that disease for them to one that can be not life-threatening in many cases. But we haven't taken that same approach with substance use. And at ALAViDa, we do this in a way where, once somebody interacts with us once, if we're included in their group benefits, or we have a sort of a relationship with their employer, basically as long as they're working there and they're willing to talk to us, even after they've completed their initial treatment, we're going to sort of stay in touch with them. And it's just keeping a door open so that, hey, the next time something happens in your life and maybe things are slightly off balance, that substance use isn't the door they turn to, and they don't miss 5 days of work before they get help again. Because things happen, right? You can be totally stable. You went from sort of drinking heavily to maybe occasionally consuming alcohol, and then you get in a car accident, or your dog dies, or something throws your norm off, or a pandemic hits, right?
Right.
And it's really about just having them have a place where they know that people understand what's going on with them, they respect their privacy, and have the tools and sort of the understanding of their personal health that can really guide them back to a stable position, without them having to sort of hit that valley.
Great. So, well, we've already talked a whole bunch about the things that ALAViDa does. Is there anything else you think you'd like to summarize about how ALAViDa works, or do you think we've covered most of that?
Yeah, maybe I'll just touch on like the actual components and how the journey works for just a moment, which is, when we implement, our trail platform, basically we are offering a confidential door for someone to, part of this is we do a launch campaign when we start with a plan sponsor, and really support a different kind of outreach. Again, this is, instead of talking about smoke-filled church basement, or your life is over professionally and personally and you need to get help now, this sort of down and out kind of addiction marketing, we're really talking about a much more relatable issue. Sort of, are your Friday nights getting in the way of your Saturday mornings? Are you afraid that you've gone from social drinker to solo drinker, right? Something that, a lot of people are concerned about, or have a loved one at home that they're concerned about. And we get broad engagement on these. So, we just did a launch across, in the tens of thousands. This group was quite large, and had, over 20% engagement on our initial launch campaign, which is just people logging on, sharing their experience of how they're coping with the pandemic, how substance use plays a role in that, and really learning about the differences in what treatment looks like. Again, what we're doing is we're taking a population and reframing them away from this sort of smoke-filled church basement that we all conjure in our mind when we think about addiction treatment, into a world of doctors and therapists available on my smartphone, and totally confidential and able to help me get better. And the components are really, each person's journey through the trail once they engage in the actual service. The trail is unique to them. So what substance they're using, how severe it is, what kind of content they like. And as we learn more about them, we actually change that, their path through the technology, by listening to what they're telling us. But there's a care team there. So we have doctors, therapists, and coaches on our team. And depending on how the case presents and what the person needs, it could be all or any one of those on their care team. And we're really combining that, that care team, so a doctor and a therapist working behind the scenes, actually looking at the same information. So everyone using our system from the clinical side is looking at the same thing that the patient's looking at, which really creates a more of an open dialogue. And there's not a lot of room for miscommunication, because everyone's reading from the same song sheet, if you will. And it's true collaborative medicine, which is, we hear this, there are a lot of overused words in healthcare and benefits. Collaborative care is one of them. Everybody says it, but I really feel strongly about the way that we actually put that to work in ALAViDa.
Great. Okay. So one of the questions that comes up first thing to me, and I know my clients think about, they'll say to me, well, Lorne, I already have an EAP, an employee assistance program. So, but I try and explain, well, but ALAViDa is different. So how does that work with an EAP?
Yeah, we think of ourselves as kind of EAP adjacent, in a sense that, while EAP is broad and shallow in most cases, again, EAP providers tend to vary. We are, we own the entire space of substance use, and we're quite deep in a sense that we own this category and can take someone from, hey, maybe I have an issue, to I'm I no longer have an issue and I'm back at work and productive, or I stayed at work the whole time. But we can take them from sort of start to finish on this issue. And, I don't think there's a single company that we've rolled out that's not also got an EAP. And so we can set up a referral relationship where, EAP is designed to detect and triage. And it's sort of short, like brief intervention if they can. And oftentimes if substance use appears for EAP, it's an immediate sort of referral out to services, oftentimes public services that come with those wait lists that you're talking about earlier. And so what we would do is just make sure that ALAViDa is on there. If that EAP, if this person is working for that employer, there's an EAP, and then they also have ALAViDa, when they're getting that referral out, okay, and you also have this option in front of you. And I think that one of the challenges for EAP is because they are broad and shallow, substance use is something that's hard for people to come forward about, right? And if you don't have a flag or, a clear message that's relatable to me, that tells me that you understand me and that you are going to be educated with what I need, oftentimes people don't start the conversation. So, industry reports for EAP in terms of picking up substance use issues are not great because we know that, overall, this is a problem that impacts about 10% of any given population right now and 21% over a lifetime. And the numbers on EAP are nowhere near that. So it's about part of what we bring as a specific solution is we put a flag in the ground for this issue that tells people that there is something for them, that they don't have to talk to HR, that they don't have to go to EAP. But if they do, there's a way to flow through to something that's specifically for this, and that kind of again pulls them into a conversation with themselves, educates them about substance use in a way that's really not done elsewhere.
Okay, very good. Yeah, so very specific and targeted. So, okay, so looking from an employee standpoint now, so how are you going to engage people? So maybe I don't know I have a problem, or I don't think I have a problem because I only have so many glasses of wine or whatever the case is. So how do you engage those people to even get them into this conversation?
Yeah, and this is we spend a lot of time here, and I think we have the benefit of cutting our teeth on direct to consumer. So we serve the public still, but we started in that world where we were, selling direct to people privately who were paying privately, and their expectations are quite high. And how you reach those people is quite challenging as well. And so I think we've applied all of that learning now within organizations in a sense of, like we just did the rollout that I was referring to a moment ago, where we rolled out to over 30,000 individuals, and we didn't have a single piece of negative feedback. And substance use is a prickly issue. So generally speaking, if you roll out to a large population and you're communicating about substance use, we used to, in times past, you would hear something back, but not a single piece of negative feedback tells us that we know how to speak about this in a way that pulls people out. Again, we had over 20% of people engaging with the campaign, but at the same time doesn't create these sort of friction points between employee and plan sponsor, or different mindsets of employees around this issue. And I think part of that, Lorne, is really just, again, making it more relatable. And we even use humor. I mean, this is a podcast, so I can't sort of pitch up any visuals here, but we have some pretty relatable, humorous posters and things that we can use to really get people's attention to say, hey, what's this ALAViDa thing all about? And it really, and then short, small actions that they can take. The campaign isn't, sign up for this treatment service today. Like it's just not the way that we start the conversation. It's more, have a cup of coffee on us, or fill out this questionnaire about, understand better what risky use of alcohol looks like, or how your what things in your life you use to cope with stress. And it's really starting them on a conversation that, not only asks questions of them, because we sort of get a 5 to 10 minute questionnaire, but we're also feeding information back to them. So it's like, did you know that, you just filled this question out that says you're drinking, I don't know, 5 glasses of alcohol a day, or 5 units 3 times a week, and that actually, among your peers, that puts you in the sort of 85th percentile or whatever. That kind of feedback information for people can really be eye-opening. And particularly, we're starting this conversation oftentimes around alcohol or cannabis, which are legal substances that are, again, more approachable. They have less stigma. They still have stigma, but they have less stigma than, say, opioids or other substances. And we're educating them about what harmful use looks like, and or what the long-term health indications are, right? I think that this stuff is changing all the time. The research is really, even since we started ALAViDa, 6 years ago, the research has come a long way. It's not a secret that alcohol is a group 1 carcinogen and a causal factor in over 60 diseases and disorders. And I don't think most people know that. It's pretty eye-opening when you get into it. I mean, particularly for women, if you look at just the linkages between alcohol and breast cancer, and even alcohol consumption at a fairly low level. Again, at the low-risk levels, it's still a significant uptick in the risk for breast cancer. And so just doing specific campaigns, we do multiple campaigns throughout a year with our plans, and we are also always producing this sort of thought leadership content. Again, it's not about like, hey, sign up for this service today. It's about education, and then encouraging people to rethink the way that, to sort of step away from their traditional idea of what treatment looks like, and to understand where the door to ALAViDa service is, whether that's for them or for a spouse or a dependent at home. Because remember, a lot of times, from the plan sponsor perspective, it might not be someone in your workforce, but if someone who's working for you has someone with a significant substance use issue at home, whether it's a child or a spouse, that's a huge drag on their productivity. They need support as well, and we actually offer specific programming for that as well. That's included in our Hello Trail premium package. So supporting a loved one in their journey of supporting someone else at home, and maybe getting them into treatment, but maybe not. Maybe just supporting them because they're dealing with a lot in supporting that person at home.
Wow, that's fantastic. That sounds like just a great approach to me. I guess I'd be maybe alarm bells would go off if you told me that I was in the 85th percentile of alcohol consumption of everybody in the company. So, so good.
Yeah, and I should say a caveat there, Lorne, being we don't do that for companies of 5 or 10. These are, we're able to provide that feedback when we do larger groups because we get enough sample size to provide anonymity.
Right. Yeah. It's got to be privacy. Right? Yeah. So,
yeah.
So there's 5 of us in the office here. So yeah, I'd be wondering how you come up with 85%. But anyway.
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. So all right. So for companies, what do you think is their biggest challenge that they face as far as trying to change their approach? Because it's been the same for years and years, right? Like we said, there's an issue. We end up, okay, you can't come to work. You gotta go somewhere. So they need to change their approach to this. So what's the biggest challenge to making this change?
Yeah, I think about it in sort of, I would put employers into 2 groups, and it's sort of the safety sensitive and the not. And I think that the challenge with those who aren't in a safety sensitive environment is just it's just taking a step back and not getting involved in these cases. And I think I think overcoming this stigma of even talking about it, right? The weird thing about stigma, Lorne, is that it's everywhere. In a sense that, if you have a problem, there's stigma. But also if you're thinking about having a conversation with your workforce, I mean, we have a lot of plan sponsors who say things like, I don't really want to, make it look like we have this problem. And it's like, well, statistically speaking, everybody has this problem. If you have more than, again, 3 people working with you, odds are you've got somebody with a substance use issue. And so I think it's overcoming the stigma of just talking about this broadly. The way you overcome stigma is to offer solutions broadly, not to offer them to the 3 people who need them because they're in crisis.
Right.
You don't give a benefit and say, this is for you, Carol and Steve, right? You need to talk to the whole organization about what substance use looks like. And I think that for us at ALAViDa, what we try and do to help organizations overcome that is to just take them out of it or to support them entirely, so that, all of the communication pieces, we have all of that stuff. We can help them have that conversation. That's our specialty. And sort of remove them from it. And I think that it's just about actually taking a step forward and being a bit bold and saying, hey, this is an issue that's really on the rise, and there are modern solutions that will help you confidentially. And we've taken the step of really making sure that that's offered to you as part of a progressive benefits offering that we have. And then I think on the other side of it, in a safety-sensitive organization, it's really there are a lot of gears that are already grinding away in a sort of a very set process on how these cases are handled. And I think that, to the credit of a lot of those organizations that we've rolled out with over the past year or two, some of the biggest change makers are actually in those organizations because they see that it's not working. Because in some cases this can be punitive, and in most cases it's only at the basically nothing happens until there's an active disability case, and that's really for a safety sensitive environment. If you have a substance use issue arise, that issue didn't become risky when you found out about it. They were there yesterday and the day before and last week, and probably for the past few years, using substance that eventually got them to the point that they got on your radar. But the question is, what are you doing before they're on your radar? And the reality is when we talk about substance use, there's sort of, for every one case that you see, there's sort of 8 or 9 cases that are percolating in a population headed towards that at some point in the future. And in a safety-sensitive organization, that's potentially an accident. It's something that's obviously detrimental to the organization. But there's this idea that we have to take all of these people who have, as soon as an issue is recognized, we have to put them off work and treat them a certain way, and that actually contributes to the lack of people coming forward in many cases. And so I think there's a bit of a different hurdle with safety sensitive, and this is in those organizations how we help is by making sure that they are comfortable and that we can do all of the things that they are concerned with, all the basics and the sort of assessments and the monitoring pieces. We don't do monitoring ourselves, but we can work with those systems to make them feel comfortable and safe. But at the same time, we can start to help them change the curve, right? We can help them engage with people in a purely confidential way through us and drive down those incidents over time. And really engage people who maybe never have an incident, who just could be more productive and healthier. And so I think that there are slightly different flavors of challenges, but I think that they're nothing like a pandemic to bring people's awareness to this issue. And I think that from our experience, these conversations are almost night and day now versus sort of 3 years ago, in a sense of people's realization that something has to change in the way that we deal with this problem in the workplace, in safety-sensitive organizations and otherwise.
Right. I think you're 100% right on. This is going to be much easier to bring up now because everywhere you turn with this COVID pandemic we're in the middle of, the employer, you're not the only one talking about it. Other people are. It's on the news, as I said, and everything else. So that just sounds fantastic. I do know, Elliot, I am going to certainly be introducing ALAViDa to all of our clients, and I'm certainly hoping there's a lot of other, whether it's companies or employers that are listening to us, whether it's other advisors that are listening to us if they're not aware of you. But I just think the work that you're doing is outstanding. So I'd really like to thank you for coming and sharing this. I know we could probably sit here and talk for a couple more hours, but we obviously can't take that long in one podcast. So this has been fantastic. Yeah. Any last words you'd like to put out there before we bring Eric back?
No, I think it's been fun, and I'd love to do it again. And I hope that as you put this out there, if people have questions or if you get specific questions, happy to work through those with you as well. This is an area where we're very proactive in helping people understand what the challenge is and how they can change things in their organization. So, just happy to help and look forward to more conversations like this one.
All right, that sounds good, and I do know I've already had conversations with a couple of our larger employers. We're trying to get Yolanda in front of them for a virtual presentation to get more details and stuff like that. So, that's great. I can't thank you enough for sharing it, and I look forward. Maybe we can do this again.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks, Lorne.
Right. If anyone in our audience is looking for more information on ALAViDa, how it can fit in, with what you're currently doing, or if perhaps you don't have any programs, please feel free just to reach out to my office. Our toll-free number is 1-866-445-4424. Obviously, we'll be able to get you more information. We can give you an introduction. I mentioned Yolanda's name, and she's more than happy to go through the program in more detail, answer any questions you have. And there's no obligation there, but I really, I think anybody with some interest in here should reach out.
Fantastic. Guys, this was a great podcast. Lorne, thank you so much for bringing Elliot on. Elliot, I got to say, I was really happy that I was muted for part of this interview, because when you said, you really don't want to call people out and say, hey, Carol and Steve, this is for you, I literally snorted because I could just picture their faces if somebody was to do that, if their employer were to call them out on the carpet about it. But that's why you brought that up. This is confidential, and it's a great program. I love what you guys are doing. I'm just echoing what Lorne said. What a beautiful job you guys are doing over there, addressing this very, very difficult issue. So thank you so much for being on the show. And of course, Lorne, thank you for bringing him on the show. And our last thank you always goes to you, the listening audience. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to the Benefits of Knowledge podcast with Lorne Curry. If you have not subscribed to the podcast yet, please click the subscribe now button below. This way, when Lorne comes out with a new podcast, it'll show up directly on your listening device. This makes it much easier to share these podcasts with your colleagues. Again, thank you so much for listening today. For everyone at Curry Financial Group, this is Eric Johnson reminding you to live your best day every day. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Benefits of Knowledge podcast. Click the subscribe button below to be notified when new episodes become available.